Happy
Oh,
anniversary!
happy anniversary.
Oh, oh, oh. Happy anniversary! 3-year anniversary! Yes! Yeah, Chris, yeah! Cheers! Happy anniversary, everyone! These are my New Year's Eve photo props that are getting some great reuse at the moment. They're dropping left and right. I wish I had one for
Recycle,
you, Chris. We could do
recycle.
a little cheers.
Yes, always recycle, people. That's our lesson for tonight. You can,
Absolutely, that's right. Chris, I
you
just want
can.
to tip my
Nice,
hat to you.
very nice.
Yes. Wow. That was so much action, so much excitement. We are so excited to be here this evening. For those of you who come in right at 7:55, when we pop in a little bit early, when we appear on your screen, you always get some extra silliness, and then people who are watching later, they get those first crazy moments. We've got some happy anniversaries in the chat
Look at
already.
that,
Hey, mom.
mom and dad out there. Thank
Mom
you,
and Dad,
Chris
Chris
Matt, my good
Madden.
friend. His ears must have been burning.
Yes,
Just talking.
that's right. We were just talking about you, Chris. It was so awesome to see you last night at the Ekphrasis event for the Black Rock Arts Guild. It was so much fun. And shout out to Meg Moore and Victoria. It was so great to see you both last night as well. And shout out to all the artists and the cool people that we met. A really awesome experience. But Chris, how was your weekend?
My weekend was very, very mellow, and
Nice.
yes, it was quite pleasantly mellow. Just hung
Lovely.
out, took some hikes, and
Oh,
and just kind of relaxed and
cool.
did some reading and yeah, thoroughly enjoyable. Because I'm getting up in years, Katie, and
No,
it's so
Chris,
true. No,
that's
I
not
had
true. Lies.
I had some hectic weekends there, and it was nice to just have a weekend where I can just like chillax.
Yeah, maybe have a martini.
I didn't have much.
Well, actually, Chris, it's good that you had a weekend to relax because March was just like the most fun-filled month for you, starting out right out the gate with movie weekend with A Little White Lie, the movie based on your book Schreiber coming out. We went 3 days of movie going. Then
Yes.
then what happened? And then I believe Frankie had a production, and then
Yeah,
you were at a conference.
yep. So yeah, it was action packed.
It
Action packed.
was.
So April is mellow, and then in not next week, but the week after, then we're going to college exploring.
College exploring, how exciting!
So yes, so that's one of these rites of passage
Indeed it is.
that we're going to be going through, and
Very nice.
yeah, so more excitement. So April will be action packed as well, and then
Amazing. We love
come
it. We love it. We love it. That is so cool. We also had our in-person open mic
we
last
did.
Friday night. It was another incredible event. People, you got to come down, fly in, commute in, sign
That's
up.
right. Amtrak.
Amtrak it in. It is worth it. It's an incredible community evening with really, really wonderful acts and features. We've got poets, we've got writers, we've got comedians, we've got our parlor trick guy,
Right.
Zachary.
That's right. Magic.
Yeah,
And
and hey, if you're visiting the Northeast this summer, anytime soon, and that coincides with our weekend, we would love to have you come stop by or even be a feature. So please do let us know. Saying hi here to Marie Mitchell. Thank you. Happy anniversary to us, Chris. Yeah,
how about that?
and from Anne McClellan Lardas, thank you so much. She says, thank you for doing this. Our pleasure, Anne. And Susan M. Davis is in
Susan M.
the house.
Davis.
Susan M. Davis.
Susan, are you out of California? Yep, she's in Colorado now. She's getting closer. She's
Yeah,
getting closer.
yeah, that's
So,
right. She's
right.
inching closer across the country there.
And I think I heard something that she's getting another MFA. I don't know. I thought I saw that somewhere.
Are there, well,
I
Susan,
don't even know what's left for her to
I
get.
don't know if there are any left. No, I know what you mean. Susan's collecting them all. It's amazing. It's very amazing. Well,
We're
Chris,
late. We're late.
it's time to officially welcome everyone to Fumfa reading number 124, our 3-year anniversary reading. Welcome everybody. Yeah, happy anniversary.
Salute.
As you can see here, I have a wine glass that says because quarantine 2020, and that's why
That's why we're here.
that's why we're all here. And that's why we've been here for 3 years. The ye old story of how this all began was that Chris and I connected after a little while of kind of, not catching up for a bit, which was a travesty, which I'll never let happen again. But we wanted to do a reading together to kind of celebrate connecting, and that was mid-March 2020. So as you all know, everything shut down and everybody moved everything online, and we said, well, why don't we do an online reading, and why don't we make it kind of a thing, because we're going to be inside for a while. And here we are.
3 years later.
3 years later, with ye old Crane Lake from the residency. Hey, people, throw some emojis in the chat if you remember Crane Lake from the MFA residencies, or if you remember us talking about it on here.
Great. If you're having flashbacks right now, we understand. And give us a shout out, a Crane Lake shout.
Crane Lake shout out. It is still, it's still Crane Lake.
Yes.
It's I'm gonna sip that after I read. Make sure I'm feeling good. Oh, that's too funny. Oh, that's too funny. But we are so happy to be here. We're so excited to celebrate 3 years with you. And, of course, we want you to ask your questions about our writing lives and our pieces in the Q&A. But please feel free to ask questions about what it's been like for us to be doing this these last 3 years. I think in this past year, the biggest change that's happened is that we've wanted to keep online going, but incorporate an in-person event. All of us long to be together in person as well. I think that's certainly there for Chris and myself. So Eco Evolution, Brad Kerner over there made that possible. And then, our community, our online community, our Fumfa community, and then the local community came out to support it like crazy. And we just so appreciate all of you here online, all of you who show up and come out and enjoy our in-person open mics. And we hope to continue this forever. Please let us know when you have books to share. Let us know when you want to be a feature or a sign up or an in-person feature. Tell your friends. We want to keep this going forever. Right, Chris? Yeah, cheers to that. Oh, Crate Lake. Here we go. Woo! A Crane Lake Pinot Gris.
As my friend Sandy Carlson says on here, after the first glass, it's all the same. So, just get through that first glass and you'll be okay. Katie.
Oh my God. You know what? Chris Madden just brought back a memory here. The Crane Lake is Chuck Johnson's favorite.
Oh, true.
Chuck Johnson. Chuck Johnson. Good old Chuck.
$2 Chuck.
$2 Chuck. There we go. That's right, Chris. That's right. Well, before we do need to talk about what's coming up.
Yes, we do.
Before we get into the reading. So it's okay if we start if I start a moment late. Chris, tell us what we have coming up here and tell us a little bit about our stats as well.
Our stats. Well, that's right. Well, here we are at our 124th live stream reading. And we've had 272 distinct individual readers on this little program. That, of course, includes us and many people who have been on more than once, but we only count them once. And so it's, what did I just say? 272?
272 writers. Some of them who have returned, who have been on more than
writers, playwrights, screenwriters,
poets.
I started with.
Sorry, it bears repeating.
Poets, and more poets. Yeah. So, well, next week we'll be off because it's Easter, and that's, we want people to be at home eating their peeps and chocolate eggs next Sunday night. So, but the week after that we'll be back. That's the 16th of April. You can come and celebrate having sent off your taxes, and we'll have our friend Amanda Parrish Morgan, who read with us last week in person. She'll be returning and reading some tremendous nonfiction, and we'll also have poet Benjamin Grossberg on there. And then the following week, we return to Ecoevolution for our in-person open mic, and we have quite a lineup, including a couple of Fumfa folks. Yeah, Sharbari Ahmed is going to join us. The reclusive and elusive Jamie Chesbro will be
we've been trying to get Jamie on since almost basically day one. We're very excited.
We've been trying for 3 years to get Jamie in on this, and we finally, I bribed him, so I'll just say
we've been doing some arm twists. It only took 3 years, but
and then we've got Van Hartman and also Julie Sarkissian. Those are our featured readers at that open mic live in person. And then, oh boy, I'm just going to run down all these. We got Ann Wong, BJ Buckley, KJ Michike, Sharbari's coming back for a feature, Jack Powers and Jessica Quello. Then we got more in-person stuff, and then leading into June, where we have Fairfield Book Prize finalists over a course of 2 weeks, including the lovely and talented Katie, the Schneiderator.
I knew you were going to say that.
So lots to look forward to on this program.
Lots to look forward to. We are still going strong. And like I said, please do reach out to us if you would like to be on the show, or if you would like to sign up in person, or please tell your friends. So we are very, very excited. Well, Chris, I think it's time for you to introduce me.
All right, then. She's ready for her close-up.
I am. Wait.
All right, this is going to take a while. This is quite the bio.
I wrote a thick paragraph.
Great. Katherine, a.k.a. Katie Schneider, a.k.a. the Schneiderator, is a poet living in Norwalk, Connecticut. She holds an MFA from, where else? Fairfield University's MFA program, where she worked closely with the great Baron Wormser and Dr. Kim Bridgeford. She has also obtained an MA in TESOL. How do you say that?
TESOL.
TESOL, and has taught adult ESL in the greater NYC area for 10 years before obtaining recently a third master's degree in data science. Here's to that. There's her third master's.
You
and Susan M. Davis are holding the record. Being an active participant in creative community is important to Katie. She has co-founded and co-hosts this very online literary live stream, Fumfa Poets and Writers Live, with moi. and with whom she also organizes monthly in-person open mics at Eco Evolution. Katie enjoys combining poetry with music and other creative arts as well. Her endeavors in this regard can be followed on social media at. Okay, so it's the story of how. So you just gotta find it. You gotta look it up here. I'm not gonna spell it out.
The underscore. You're fine. You're fine.
The underscore story underscore of the story of how. You'll find it. Her first chapbook, I Used to Remember the Story of How, was published by Finishing Line Press way back in 2019. Her publication credits for individual poems include Ruminate, Blue Line, The Poetry Porch, The Paddock Review, Collateral, and the upcoming 2023 Connecticut Literary Anthology. Katie's poem, Breath. I had to do a breath there. Was a nominee for a Pushcart Prize, and her latest manuscript, Breaking the Fever, is a finalist for the Fairfield Book Prize. So, Katie, have at it.
Thank you so much, Chris. I had a little bit of a long bio there, but I enjoyed hearing it. I'm just teasing. All right, so I'm going to get straight into it. I will take about 6 minutes over our usual time just to make up for our extra chatting today. We'll make sure Chris has extra time as well. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a little introduction to my reading, and then I'm going to try to not talk too much between the poems and let them speak for themselves. So here's my introduction to my reading. In this reading, I'm going to bookend it with a few poems from my chapbook, I Used to Remember the Story of How, while the bulk of the reading is going to come from my manuscript, Breaking the Fever. I see my new manuscript as a continuation of my chapbook, where emotion and calls for justice do not hold themselves back from applying pressure and testifying to hard truths concerning freedom, self-worth, and human rights, as well as resistance to many forms of repression and oppression. A fever breaking is when the tide turns in your body's struggle against an infection. And afterwards, you feel a bit better. Your mind is clearer. You are relieved of pain and are on the road to greater healing. I feel that concept is very much captured in the religious deconstruction, the resistance to narcissistic abuse, and healing from heartbreak explored in my book, but even more in Breaking the Fever. So there's my introduction. I'm going to get started with 2 poems from I Used to Remember the Story of How, available wherever books are sold. And the poem I'm going to start with is called Breath. When I sit beside you in church, I can hear you breathe. I rarely think of you so mortally. I can feel you lean back in the pew, can feel the creaking wood against your push. Your shoulder muscle and bone can feel the vibration of your anxious foot. If I glance over, I can see the profile of your face, long nose, brown eye, angle of jawline, your still and placid gaze, dark hair falling beside. When we stand and sing, I can hear your voice sound with mine. Eyes close, hands lift, a moment sublime. Hands fall, eyes open, rapture subsides. The benediction is said, we move to leave. We stretch our arms, we yawn and blink. Did you forget? You and I are finite things, depending on a breath. The next poem I'm going to share from my book is called Unwelcome. Okay, and there's just a little verse before it from Luke 4:28-29. They got up, drove him out of the town, referring to Jesus, and took him to the brow of a hill on which the town was built in order to throw him down the cliff. Yikes. And here's the poem. In your own town, they drove you to the edge of a cliff. Those, first delighted, then enraged, now poised to kill. They rose up offended at what you had said. When 2 prophets were rejected, they helped Gentiles instead. Implying that you would do the same, it turned the Nazarenes' pride to hate. But it was not your time to die. You escaped through the mob, jostling the thick shoulders of those you meant to save, those who grew up beside you. those you made from dry dust. And we have never stopped doing this, driving you to the edge of a cliff, angry with what you've said. We fully intend to push you off, to hear you break like a fable below, and be our own gods instead. Thank you so much. All right. And here I'm so excited to share some poems from my manuscript, Breaking the Fever. Some of these I've shared on here before, but never in this exact context. So I hope you enjoy hearing any poems that maybe you've enjoyed before, or enjoy hearing them for the first time. Okay. Pity. How could you hurt me? I've been so kind. I winced and all my face said, take pity. I wove a quilt. I warned you. You moved me. Took, but gave nothing, not even pity. I've spent my life soft, speaking gently, deferring, relying on your pity. I have looked you in the eye, thou monsters, who consumed me without thanks or pity. There is no art. There is no subtlety in the narcissist. He laughs at pity. There is no shame, no self-effacing change in the bully who reigns, banning pity. What kind of animal are these cruel ones, so proud not to be kind or have pity? From the time they met me, rejected me, ridiculed and used me without pity. And they will be the ones who seem to win, and dazzled masses will forsake pity. Worship a fat cat savior, slick and snide, hate neighbors, deride the poor, no pity. The beaten, sad Jesus said love, mercy. They scoffed, man up, I don't need your pity. There's no safe place here for a tender soul. Hold up your own light, don't expect pity. Thank you. This poem will be in the 2023 Connecticut Literary Anthology. I'm so excited for that. All right, this next poem is a longer section poem, which I'm only going to read selected sections from. If you come to our finalist night reading coming up in a few weeks, you might get to hear the whole thing. So get excited. This next poem is called This Holy Land. I'm just going to pause in the section breaks. I'm not going to say the section numbers. All right, This Holy Land. It begins with the clinging and ends with letting go. Virgin hills rise and cross, infinite crest and fall. At first it was ecstatic, yet carving shadows in the deep, deep well of loneliness, fear of abandonment, the victim's obedience. I didn't want to touch you, or else moved my hands. I believed in your I love you, drowned the warning in my head. It didn't like or trust you. I was wailing in the end. How could you disregard me? I gave you this holy land. I didn't make you a villain. You are a villain. There was nothing in this exchange I didn't understand. When I was oppressed, when I was weak, maybe you had me. But nothing now can keep me in that prison. He didn't have to keep up a mask. I did it for him. I bore all his cruelty and swept up the mess. I hated when he touched me, and that's when he said he liked it. What is this waiting? This ravenous hunger for everything, for no regretting, for the hope of new love, for bravery, for healing. I am the hero Messiah today. I walk down the hall, out the door, afraid. I pay the penalty. I bear the weight. Thank you so much. Woo! Okay, this next poem is called Prayer at 32. Save me from the sin of what I thought I knew before. Save me from the sin of what I thought was true before. Save me from the sin of what I believed was right before. Forgive me for the pain of those I hurt in ignorance before. Save me from the demagogue, save me from the god of war, save me from the charlatans who swindled me before, save me from the Pharisees, the tyrants, and the priests, save me from the influence of every sheep-clothed beast. Raise me with the little ones, raise me with the weak, raise me with the gentle ones, the injured and the meek. Tell those snakes we rise above their violence and control. Tell their mob the torch and pitchfork cannot pierce our souls. And big thanks to Marie Mitchell, who is in the audience. We shared poems about a year ago, and she is the one who suggested the word charlatans, which I love. Thank you so much, Marie. All right, this next poem is called Risk of Snow. Since I stayed home on risk of snow that never came, I started to decide on my own what I should fear. Only dying too soon without living, without loving you. By then I'd obsessed over other people's rules for years. They're otherwise or else, the Bible said. Threatened with exclusion and withholding, I took the abuse. I lost both pleasure and intuition's thread, staying home and staying quiet until supposed danger passed. I crucified desire on a cross of obedience. I missed you. I missed the concert, missed all that could have been, while for years I languished heartsick within the fold. Never again. I'll brave the snow. I'll brave the wolves, brave even risk of hell, to freely decide for myself what I will do. This next poem is called Paul in Arabia. It's a few poems in my new manuscript which have two titles. An interesting juxtaposition of two titles. It's Paul in Arabia, and the other title is Deconstruction. Stand up, healed from blindness, and go home another way. Decide what your intervention means and who you are. Persecutor, executor, blindsided by paradoxical error. Turn away from it, cover it over, take it down. Deconstruct law and ritual, what it meant to you in retreat. Become an ex-Pharisee tent maker. Learn to live with foreign people, a culture you don't know. Become adept at having a different home, letting the burden of former things go. Everyone you thought you were, everything you thought you'd earned. Become a newborn stranger to yourself and let the old tower fall. And this one is called From the Winter Evening Woods. Now at twilight in the snow-covered woods, every inch of the ground a sparkling white blue. Follow the silence to the last you heard from the acquaintances who prayed for you. Was it prayer you'd needed or just warmth? Fellowship with soothing, steadfast, true, until the fall of many icons you couldn't comprehend a dissenting view. You'd heeded predator apologists, bully pastors. You sang with insurrectionists before you knew. Back then they were just Christians, huddled, embracing, speaking wishes to God in the night for you. You'll miss the warmth, not hypocrisy, judgment, or shame. The freedom here outside is cold and new. This next poem is called City on a Hill, and it also has a Bible verse. To get it started, it's from Matthew 5:14. This is Jesus speaking, and he says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." And this is one of the poems I wrote after I traveled to the Holy Land, specifically the occupied territories of Palestine. I was traveling between the state of Israel and Palestine. I am a city on a hill. I know what Jesus meant. I saw it myself. I saw the cities on the hills in the Holy Land. Out of the terminal into the van, we drove through the night, Israeli street to Palestine. I saw the cities on the hills. They sparkled in the black ore of the crisp January sky, exposed, twinkling, bright. I am a city on a hill, eyes fixed to the window. And when we crossed the army-guarded checkpoint into the town, the scene came more to life, Christmas decorations strung up across the streets, parallel parking, car beeps. I swear I saw a man riding a horse inexplicably. The driver made friends with me. He stopped to buy kunafa. We ate it as he drove with sticky fingers. And there I was in a hotel in Bethlehem, moved from a basic room to one with a balcony. I could see out from inside the city. Each day I looked out, I walked around the ancient places and the newly built. I thought about what it means to be a city and a light. And what are all these structures and things except dust not yet pounded out? And what really matters except the lives of the people who live now? And if this was the longitude and latitude where Christ was born and is no more, then ours are the mortal bodies that hold the holy wisdom and the option to conjure life with its power. People are the only holy cities, the contrast in the silent night. We are the living truth cast on the screen of time. This is another poem with a double title. It is called The Holy Land, and the other title is The Occupied Territories. Driving back to Bethlehem on a clear winter night, my memory of it now makes it wider. I returned from a village perched on a hillside, carved with ancient terraces like each hill in the vista. Seating homes, holding orchards, each catching sunshine, all living, breathing testaments to the people of Palestine. Now, between the last evening and first morning prayer, I almost forgot occupation was there, that man-made oppression's hideous gears were churning under distant stars of the sky, among the silent, narrow roads and green minaret lights. I watched the twists and turns, ascending, descending, so many stone buildings with people dreaming inside. I almost forgot at that time that tucked into the shadows of the land were the cold cenotaphs and apathetic bones of patriarchs in their hallowed crypts, bare to air ruins of emperors and kings, the lingering echoes of prophets' warnings. Somewhere, crushed to powder, was the broken jar of perfume, the landing place of Jesus' tears, the execution site, the empty tomb. All right, this poem is called Today. Gonna take a little transition out of the religious deconstruction poems and kind of take a slightly different tone and subject matter for the remainder. Today. You looked up from your sulking and felt a change. You said, today isn't about pain. Look, death is defeated again. You've opened up your eyes and the earth turns to the sun, which is waking the blue trail of night. Things begin again, the buses snort to life. Each red-lit exit sign grows fainter as lights flick on in restaurants, and the sun glints off the breakfast silverware. This poem is called Mostly I Want a Man. Mostly I want a man. I'm embarrassed when I say this. But what I mean is I want a best friend who is a man who loves me. I'm embarrassed when I say this. And what I mean by this is that he listens to me, that he wants to listen to me for whole train rides worth of time, for whole boomy, echoing nights. I'm embarrassed when I say this. Come find me, please want to find me. I say soundlessly to no one, wishing above the electric hum of tracks. I like that, Chance. Chance says, you don't need a man in the chat. That's right, Chance. That's right. My poems are going to get there eventually. They will, even in this reading, Maybe even in this next poem. This next poem, I can't ever leave this next poem out of my readings because it's one of my favorites, and I think it's a favorite of some people as well. This poem is called Maximum Capacity. Let me get my hair right. Okay. Maximum capacity. Your maximum capacity isn't enough for me. Have you ever heard of codependency? I will pour myself into your wounds, lift you up, part the seas. But when my heart longs to receive, you offer a gesture and say, that is my maximum capacity. Not enough for me, not enough for me. There was a new man. A garden bloomed from me at the honey of his words, his attention, his gaze. I am here to be known. Come, welcome to the banquet of all I hold to share. Warm in the sunlight till he turned away. To someone else, he'd had enough of me. Not enough for me, not enough for me. I walked 100 blocks in heels from the upper to the lower east side, searching for a new home, begging for his time. He's at maximum capacity, too tired, going home. Not enough for me. My feet are all blisters, chest and back caked with sweat, sore shins, one more subway. I don't want to go home. I don't want to be alone. Not enough for me. Drown me in strangers, give me more stares, speak to me, please answer me, meet with me, share with me, stay with me, play with me, smile at me, hug me, hold me, love me, stay with me, match my capacity. I have so much energy, unabashed affection, honesty, you run from me. Your crumbs are not enough for me, not enough for me. I am the street, I am the sky, I am looking at you from everything you didn't try, from all the places one step ahead, from all the cities you haven't been yet, the words patience and never, what can they mean? All your no's and not nows and silence make me scream rage at your maximum capacity. I have no boundaries. I move in all directions. I never said it was healthy. But doing the same old thing, going to bed at 9, keeping routines, everything familiar at all costs, easy will never be enough for me. Be who you are. I'll be who I'll be. 1,000,000 times outgrowing your maximum capacity. My desire, my passion, as big as the sun, as overwhelming. Keep moving, keep growing, keep going, and the pace will be enough for me. Honoring the fire will be enough for me. Chasing and feeding my maximum capacity. Thank you so much. Oh, Midnight said in the chat, maximum capacity, always like this piece. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I have 3 more, and hopefully that'll take just the 3 more minutes. That'll be exactly 25 minutes from when we started with my reading. If I go over, Chris, feel free to go over. I'm so sorry. But I will be wrapping it up within the next 5 minutes, I promise. 3 to 5 minutes, okay. All right. This poem follows up the other one. It's called "The Forest Judges You." Maybe one of my favorite titles of poems. The forest judges you. Your favorite trail is crowded today, full of families, rookie hikers saying things she would say. How refreshing it is to be outside. Which way do we go? What a beautiful view. What's the name of that tree, that flower? You don't want to answer. They're annoying and somehow always too close, close as the thoughts that say, take a picture for her. She'd like that as much as she'd like to be here with you, naive and sweet with golden brown hair, an icon in the sun. Her love is like a child's, like a mother's. In her mind, you've seen her carry you, hold you like a pieta. You don't move, you say nothing, you feel her strength. Nothing is as beautiful without her. Heaven beams of sun between the trees aren't glorious, they just illuminate the empty space. You always used to walk alone, stomping out frustrations in the dust. The forest took them. You used to bring your bike and ride, soar and fly over rocks and roots, fast as wind, as breathlessness, gliding a single roller coaster through the leaves, no one to avoid. The forest smiled at your joy. But today you only feel like a sullen, too thin man, like a dry leaf that should have been shaken off the branch in fall. It's winter now, and you're still hanging, holding on somehow, offering nothing. But you know for sure, for some reason, she still wants you. Sometimes you think about the things you can't control, the things you don't see ahead of you, around you, beneath you, the thorny stick that trips the bike wheel and throws you over the handlebars, a thudding sound that no one hears. Sudden shock, animal adrenaline, the forest cut your skin. When you first touched her, you couldn't believe how soft she was, plump and tender where you were leather and bone. And her hand found the place on the back of your shoulder, a significant, scabbed-over wound. She asked you with concern. You had forgotten it, forgotten falling. She held her hand over it like a balm. And this is the last poem in my new manuscript. It's called The New Year. The grandfather chimes on the hour. The chapel bell chimes too. I now sit by a cooling hearth, a dying fire, and I am waiting for no one. All right. Woo! Okay, and we're wrapping this up. This is the last poem. I swear. I promised to finish up from my chapbook. This poem is called Lantern. Suddenly all I see is the lantern in my hand, assaulted by rain, its flame alive. Midnight came fast, and darkness edged in between the trees across the leaf-layered ground and left me lost. I remember the evening, how the sunset flashed on my eyes like an old film strip, bright and silent, light as breath and ancient, etched onto my memory. Hypnotized, I fell asleep. Later, when the storms rolled in, they washed those watercolors away, bled every image wet and heavy, and woke me in a flood of gray. I almost drowned for shock and sadness until I lifted up my arm, and I could see the step before me and the next one after that. I must move to be rescued, to find a way beyond this place. The flame defies the dark, and I see I'm not alone. There are others waking in the night and lifting their lanterns, walking home. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you.
I can't screech like you.
Chris Belden, thank you. Oh, I'm so honored to get a harmonica solo.
The breadth of the poetry, of the poems that you read. Amazing.
Thank you.
That's such an exciting new collection that you have. And you know, the old poems are fantastic. And these new ones, they're pardon me, but they're kick-ass. They're kick-ass.
Thank you so much, Chris.
If you want to put that on the cover, feel free.
Oh my God, I absolutely will. I must. That's like the highest of praise from one of my dearest friends.
They are kick-ass poems.
Chris Belden, author of Schreiber.
That's right. Unbelievable. People get your questions ready because there's so much going on in these poems, and such, you know, going from, you know, like the Sermon on the Mount to Mostly I Want a Man and everything in between, you know, the Middle East and it's just it's a lot.
It's a lot. That's you know, if you ever want to go for coffee with me, I have some stories, very interesting stories from the last bunch of years of my life.
You know, some of these poems have so much breadth to them. Even some of these poems, even the individual poems, that they have two titles. It's
That's
like
right.
you can't even, one title can't even encapsulate it.
It can't. So. Chris, thank you so much for that beautiful, beautiful praise and commentary. That means so much to me, so much to me. But folks, we have another incredible reading coming at you this evening from my dear friend, fellow Fumfa inaugural cohort, aka best cohort alum, fiction writer extraordinaire Chris Belden. Pew, pew, pew. I have the honor of introducing him this evening, and I can't wait to hear his reading. Let's do it. Chris Belden is the author of the novels Carry On and Shriver, recently adapted into the film A Little White Lie. Y'all need to see it if you haven't seen it already, as well as the Fairfield Book Prize winning story collection, The Floating Lady of Lake Tawaba. In October 2023, Woodhull Press will publish Closer to Freedom, a collection of prose and poetry by the members of a workshop Chris led for 10 years in a maximum security prison. A graduate of Fumfa, Chris is a 2019 CT Arts hero and currently runs workshops at the Westport Writers Workshop. He's also the co-founder and co-host of Fumfa Poets and Writers Live and Chris and Katie's Open Mic at Ecoevolution. All right, Chris, I can't wait to hear your reading. Take it away.
Alrighty. Thank you, Katie. That was amazing. It's a hard act to follow. I'm going to read from a novel called The Vote. This is a novel that has not been published, and I think one of the reasons it hasn't been published is because it's a very unusual novel. It's about a neighborhood, and there are, I believe, 25 points of view represented in this novel. So it's not a single, even 2 or 3 protagonists. There's 25. So I really wanted to write something that spoke in a kind of a chorus about this neighborhood, and this is one of the chapters. And just a little background here, because this comes fairly late in the book. In this neighborhood, it's in a small little lakeside neighborhood that resembles very much the one I live in now, and some people are trying to establish what's called a tax district in order to take care of this lake, which is all covered in algae and it has all kinds of problems. And this takes place in 2015, and there's a lot of pushback on this because it's a tax. And I wrote this after the 2016 presidential election, as kind of a, I don't know, kind of a allegory of what happened in the country that's going on in this neighborhood. And this particular character has been in previous chapters, but not from his point of view, from other people's point of view. And he's kind of a cantankerous old fart. Who he's very bigoted. And by the way, trigger warnings. Some of his opinions are not politically correct and are not shared by me, but they are in here because that's who he is. And his name is Chester Erskine, and this is how it goes. The doorbell started ringing well before sundown. Chester, however, was only half dressed, and so he yelled down to Cheryl and Abigail. Oh, by the way, Abigail is his granddaughter. Chester and his wife's son left. They ran away after he and his wife had their daughter, and his wife died, and their son ran away. And so Chester and Cheryl, who are in their 60s, 70s almost, are raising Abigail. So he yelled down to Cheryl and Abigail to answer the door. Then he cursed under his breath as he attempted to attach the blue and green parrot to his shoulder. Every year he struggled with this goddamn parrot, whose plastic talons had broken or corroded to the point that the safety pin wouldn't keep the bird upright. He'd have to ask Cheryl for help, which ruined the effect of his entrance down the stairs. A pirate can't enter a room without a parrot on his shoulder, for crying out loud. He heard Cheryl shoo Gary, their dog, from the door, followed by her oohs and ahs at the trick-or-treaters' costumes and the handing out of Snickers and Three Musketeers. The kids sounded young, the wee ones always showing up while the sun still shone so they could get their precious sleep. But what good is Halloween in the daytime? It loses its whole purpose, which is to experience the magic of darkness. He blamed the parents, The moms, let's face it, who read too many damn books about how to raise children. Sure, put them to bed at a regular time, but on Halloween you need to be a little flexible. Let the kids go a little crazy. They can handle it, especially on a Saturday night. God forbid these kids have an off day because they stayed up late in order to experience their childhoods. No wonder you end up with these crybabies who want to tax everyone. He finally managed to get the parrot to stay vertical, though he'd have to be careful not to make any sudden moves. He glanced at himself in the bedroom mirror, tri-corner hat, fake curled up mustache, eye patch, white ruffled shirt, and black suit coat, black trousers. He should have been wearing black boots with buckles, he knew, but his old pair didn't fit anymore because of his bunions, and they were by far the most expensive element of the costume, so he opted for his black slippers, certain that these self-absorbed kids would never notice such a small detail. The doorbell rang again. "I'll get it," he yelled down. Cheryl waited at the bottom of the stairs, Gary yipping and darting between her feet and the front door. "Shut up, you dumb mutt," Chester said. A few years ago, he'd attempted to dress the dog as a parrot. This was before he'd gotten the realistic one for his shoulder, but Gary hated it and tore the brightly colored feathers off after only a few minutes. Chester paused at the bottom of the stairs. "How do I look?" Cheryl stepped forward and repositioned his hat. "Is that parrot going to stay on?" she asked. "Lord, I hope so." She tugged his jacket down. It definitely fit more snugly than last year. He needed to exercise more, according to Dr. Pearl, but exercise was for chumps. It's all about attitude, Chester had insisted to the doctor, pointing to his noggin. It's all up here. He took a breath like an actor would, he thought, before making his entrance, and swung open the door. 3 little pigs stared up at him. Behind them stood their 3 mothers, all of them cloaked in elegant casual jackets. He bent down low to look the little pigs in the eyes. "Arr, mateys, can I help ye?" "Say trick or treat," the lead mom said. "Go on." Chester didn't recognize any of the moms. Sometimes he would ask trick or treaters if they lived in the neighborhood, but these mothers were white, so he let it slide. "Trick or treat," the kids said out of unison. They needed more practice, Chester thought. "Arr, my little mateys, I believe I can be of assistance." He turned to Cheryl, who handed him the large stainless steel bowl filled with candy. Chester had hoped his wife would dress up this year in her pirate-era barmaid costume, but she said it made her boobs too showy, which was exactly why Chester liked it so much. It ruined the effect of his performance to have her standing around in an apron that said Grandma of the Year. He made a note to banish her to the den for the duration. The piggies each took 1 candy per Chester's orders and dropped them into their matching paper sacks. "Hey, mister, why are you wearing slippers?" one little pig asked. Chester looked down at his feet. "Oh, okay, kids, say thank you," the lead mom said. She was quite attractive, Chester noticed. He'd like to see her in that barmaid outfit. "Thank you," the children said as they turned and headed off, their feet crunching on fallen leaves. "Arr, my pleasure, mateys. Be careful, you hear? There be monsters about." Oh, and another detail: there's been bear sightings in the neighborhood. The moms waved, and Chester noted that none were what he'd call a spring chicken, not even the pretty one. He didn't understand how women could wait so long to have children. Some of them had to get help with their wrinkled old eggs and whatnot, which led to all kinds of problems. Chester hardly ever saw handicapped children back in the day. Sure, there was the occasional retarded kid, usually due to some screw up during delivery, but the town seemed to crawl now with these down kids, especially at the Stop and Shop, where several of them packed groceries. We weren't meant to wait so damn long to reproduce, he thought as he watched the 3 women head off. "I need to rake the leaves," he told Cheryl after shutting the door. The trees were half bare now, and he really should wait until the leaves had all fallen, but he hated a cluttered yard. "You know what I think about that," she said. She was always getting after him to hire one of these local landscaper crews to remove the leaves, but he wouldn't hear of it. "What, hire a bunch of illegals?" he said. He told Cheryl to take it easy for the rest of the night. "I can handle the kids myself," he said. "You relax and watch TV." Abigail, this is their granddaughter, she's 16 years old, came down the stairs dressed like a hillbilly tart in short jeans and a blouse tied high in front, showing off her belly and her boobs. Her hair hung in twin pigtails, and she painted her cheeks red with fake black freckles under her eyes. "What on earth?" Chester said. "I'm headed out." "Where to?" Cheryl asked. Nothing in her tone indicated shock at their granddaughter's appearance. "A party," she said. She looked at Chester as if waiting for his objections. "Who with?" he asked. "Josh." "Oh, that's nice," Cheryl said. She turned to Chester. "They're back together. Isn't that nice, dear?" Chester snorted and said, "Arr." "Do you have a sweater?" Cheryl asked Abigail. "You'll freeze and not get up." "Freeze is right," Chester said. It was about 50 degrees out there, and she had more skin exposed than not. I'll be okay. The party's inside. How are you getting there? Chester asked. Grandma's car. Abigail held up the keys. The fob was a small framed photo of Gary. Well, be careful, sweetie, Cheryl said. She tried to kiss her, but Abigail pulled away, saying, Makeup. Chester considered forcing her to change her outfit, but held his tongue. Cheryl told him that it would lead to more rebellion, not less. Chester couldn't help but read between the words a criticism of him in relation to Luther, that's their son. She used to say that he was too hard on the boy, and that was why he ran off the way he did. Nonsense. Luther was spoiled by his mother. He was soft and did not have what it took to be a single father. I'm glad she and Joss are back together, Cheryl said after Abigail had driven off in her Focus. But Chester wasn't thrilled about the development. He did not like the boy's parents, especially the father. Chester thought the man's recent letter to the newspaper was disgraceful. Joss seemed like an okay boy. He was respectful at least, but Chester worried that deep down he was too much like his father, looking down on people and acting entitled. And it made Chester shudder to think what the boy might feel entitled to from Abigail. He didn't want to think about that. What he did want was a beer. But of course he'd been ordered by Cheryl not to drink more than one tonight, which he'd downed during an early dinner. Maybe later he'd sneak out to the garage where he kept a few cans in his old cooler. The bell rang and Gary barked from the den. Stay, Chester heard Cheryl tell the dog. He peeked through the small square glass in the front door, but the trick-or-treaters were too small to be seen. No adults either. He opened the door and found a paper bag in flames on the stoop. God damn it, he said, and stepped outside. He glanced left and right, but saw no one on the road. He turned back to the burning bag. He certainly wasn't going to stomp out the flames. He knew that old trick. He just let it burn itself out and then shoveled the mess into the garbage. As the little fire sizzled, he turned to look up and down the road again. Surely the little bastards were watching. What's the point of a practical joke if you don't witness it? Then came a loud bang, and Chester felt something lumpy smack against the back of his legs and rump. What the? The animals had put an M80 in the bag of dog crap. For a few seconds he admired this new twist on the trick, but then the stench hit him. What happened? Cheryl asked from the doorway. Are you all right, dear? Gary leapt out from behind her to sniff excitedly at his trousers. Chester looked down at Cheryl, trying not to curse. He looked at Cheryl, trying not to curse. She hated when he cursed. What's that smell? She asked. It's eau de cologne, Chester said. What do you think it is? But who? Cheryl looked up the road toward the sound of kids hooting and hollering. Chester didn't even bother looking. Even if he saw them, he wouldn't know the punks who did this. He used to know every kid in the neighborhood back when Luther was young. Now, other than a few of Abigail's friends, he knew none of them. Come on, dear, Cheryl said. You better get out of that get-up. He followed her into the laundry room and with her help removed his spattered trousers. Upon examination, the hem of his coat had also been hit. Do you have another pair of black pants? Cheryl asked, and a jacket? I have pants, but no jacket that'll work. The one I have is plaid. What about the parrot? He asked, removing the bird from his jacket shoulder. He examined its feathers. Luckily, the bird had escaped defilement. We'll figure it out, Cheryl said. Now, go get some pants on. More kids will be here any second. Chester went upstairs and found another pair of black pants. His slippers were a lost cause, and the only other black shoes he owned were his dress shoes, a pair of Florsheim wingtips he'd owned for 30 years. He'd had them resoled a couple of times, and every so often would shine them up himself, enjoying the ritual of it. Well, the wingtips would have to do. As he descended the stairs, Cheryl was just coming in from dousing the stoop with a bucket of water. All clear now, she said. She waved him over and, using a strategically positioned safety pin, managed to attach the parrot to the shoulder of his white shirt. Somehow it stood erect. There, she said. I don't look silly without the jacket, he asked, hating the vulnerability in his voice. She smiled. You're dressed like a pirate, dear. Of course you look silly. The bell rang. Okay then, Cheryl said. Go get him, Captain. Chester was tempted to shut down for the night, turn off the porch light, and pretend no one was home. What kind of world was it where young people pulled such dirty pranks on their elders? But then he peeked out the door window and saw a little gal dressed as a pink pony, and he figured, what the hell? Thankfully, the girl and her friends didn't seem to care that the pirate at the door wore Florsheim shoes and no jacket over his ruffled shirt. They giggled at his pirate patter, and one little boy in a cat outfit asked if the parrot could talk, to which Chester replied, Of course he can, matey. He just chooses not to. What's his name? The pink pony asked. Chester paused. No one had ever asked that question. After a little thought, he said, his name be Donald. As the sun set and the sky grew dark, he noticed the children growing taller and their costumes more ambitious and elaborate. Furry animals became princesses and aliens, though there was also the occasional half-assed ghost or hobo, too. Luther, he remembered, would often resort to such lazy costumes, putting it off until the last minute, forcing Cheryl to sacrifice a perfectly good bedsheet, cutting holes for his eyes. Chester should have known then that his son was no good, but he refused to see the harsh truth. Even now he tried not to think about Luther, though every day he could see him in Abigail's green eyes and the way she twisted Cheryl around her finger. Tonight, dressed like that, headed out without so much as an explanation, that was pure Luther. But at least she got good grades, unlike her father, and she had ambitions for college. If only she weren't seeing that Huntington boy. During a lull, he stepped out to the garage and quickly downed a can of Bud. Of course, Cheryl would smell it on his breath later, but she'd let it go. She knew he drank less this way, and that was her main objective. Just as Chester re-entered the kitchen, the doorbell rang and Gary started yapping. "Quiet, you flea bag," Chester hollered as he approached the front door. He took up the bowl of candy, now about half full, but before he could open the door, the bell rang again. "All right already," he grumbled as he pulled back the door. "Trick or treat." There stood three suspiciously tall kids, two boys and a girl, dressed as he couldn't tell. "What are you supposed to be?" he asked. "We're from the Hunger Games," the girl said. She held up a bow and arrow as if that would explain it. "The what games?" "The movies," one of the boys said. "The Hunger Games." Neither he nor the other boy seemed particularly costumed. They looked like they were about to head out for a hike in the woods, that's all. "How old are you?" Chester asked. The three exchanged looks and smirked. "You're too old to be trick-or-treating," Chester said before they could answer. "Oh, come on," the girl said. She pointed at the bowl in Chester's hand. "You got plenty." "That's for the little kids." Unbelievably, the girl lunged at the bowl and pulled out a handful of candy. "Hey!" Chester yanked the bowl out of their reach. The three kids laughed and ran down the walkway and up the road. "God damn you punks," he shouted. These were probably the same delinquents who had left the flaming bag on the doorstep. While he stood on the stoop cursing, several younger children paused at the end of the walkway. A butterfly, a rabbit, and a unicorn, apparently too spooked by the angry pirate to approach. "Well, come on," he said, not bothering with his pirate voice. "I won't bite you." The unicorn stepped forward first, stealthily, the others a few paces behind. They seemed to be 10 or 11 or so. Their costumes were sophisticated, involving face paint and clothing that looked homemade rather than created in China by children even younger than themselves. He couldn't even tell their genders. "Are you siblings?" he asked. "We're triplets," the rabbit said. "Good Lord," Chester said. No doubt someone's fertility shots had resulted in 3-for-1 kids. Well, at least they all seemed to have their marbles, and with their cute get-ups and timid expressions, they had behaved so unlike the previous gang that Chester felt generous. "Take 2 each," he said, holding out the bowl. They hesitated before each removed 2 candy bars and placed them in identical canvas bags. "What are your names?" Chester asked, wanting for some reason to prolong the transaction. "I'm Madison," the rabbit said. "Graydon," the butterfly said. "Booth," the unicorn said. What the hell kinds of names were these? They sounded like surnames. 40 years ago, he'd balked at Cheryl's insistence on naming their son after her Uncle Luther, but Booth? "Thank you, sir," the unicorn said before they all turned and walked off. Well, at least these kids were polite. Only a few more trick-or-treaters came to the door after that, with long breaks in between, during which Chester sat with Cheryl and Gary watching TV. Cheryl liked shows about true crime in which husbands and wives tried to get away with murdering one another. He held his tongue, wishing he could turn to his usual channel. He needed to keep up with the latest Washington outrages. Resigned, he pushed his eye patch up onto his forehead and watched as some poor schmuck got trapped in his own web of lies. "Now, how did he think he'd get away with that?" Cheryl asked, as the cops dragged the man to jail. And Chester felt like his wife was not so much asking a question as giving a warning. "Don't try this at home, pal." "You know," Chester said, "I didn't recognize one damn kid tonight." Cheryl nodded. "Things changed, dear." He knew she'd say that. It was her explanation for everything. Their favorite restaurant closing, Abigail growing taller than him, a colored president. Obviously things change, but to him they always seemed to change for the worse. He realized he was still wearing his pirate hat and mustache. He tossed them onto an empty chair. His bald head felt suddenly cold. "Is there any candy left?" Cheryl asked. "Some, maybe half. It's so hard to know how much to get." The program resumed after several prescription drug ads, and of course the murderous husband got convicted. As the credits rolled, Chester wondered aloud when Abigail would come home. It was 10 o'clock. Her Saturday curfew was 11. "Will you stay up?" he asked. She shrugged. "I'm tired." Then after a pause, "Abby's a smart girl, Chester." He said. "You go on up. I'll wait." He said it more because he wanted another beer than he was worried about Abigail. Cheryl grunted as she pulled herself out of her chair. She bent down and kissed his head. Don't fall asleep in the chair. You know how it hurts your back. Yes, dear. And don't forget to remove that parrot. I won't, though in truth he had forgotten. It took several minutes to unpin the damn bird from his shirt. His fingers didn't work as nimbly as they used to. When he finally got it off, he flung the bird across the room. Gary watched it from his little bed and then laid his head back down. Chester heard the floorboards creak overhead as Cheryl went about her nightly ritual. He climbed from his chair with some difficulty and went to the garage. He removed a beer from the cooler. Last one, he told himself, otherwise he'd have trouble sleeping. Tomorrow, he just remembered there was yet another meeting about this tax district plan. It would be the same old crap, a slideshow of propaganda from the board, but he needed to be there to object. Jimmy Agnew seemed to think they had enough votes, but Chester wasn't so sure. All these kids tonight, there seemed to be a lot of new people in the neighborhood, people he didn't know and trust to do the right thing. Chester had moved to Lake Tawaba 25 years ago with Cheryl and Luther just after he left the military. He'd been drawn by the beauty of the area and the down-to-earth live free or die feel of the neighborhood. There seemed to be fewer rules back then, and if anything needed doing, people rallied together. When the lake looked goopy, some folks chipped in and dumped copper sulfate into the water. It worked pretty well, and everyone felt good about it. If potholes appeared along the roads, folks would haul out their shovels and fill them with rocks and soil. Presto. No need to call the town or some high-priced expert to consult about things. Life was simple. Now you couldn't drop so much as a grain of sand into the lake without permission from some government committee of lawyers and tree huggers looking for some way to validate their existence. For years now, he talked to Cheryl about moving farther out into the wilderness, far away from the liberals and city people, but she insisted they stay, at least for Abby's sake, she'd say, bringing up the good schools and Abigail's friends. But Abigail would graduate in a year and a half, and if this tax thing passed, Chester was determined to go. This was no longer the place he loved 25 years ago. Having decided he didn't want to watch the news after all, Chester changed the channel to a college football game. He didn't care who played or who won. He just liked to see young men run like hell and knock each other over. Luther had played high school football, and though he didn't excel at it, he was good enough to make first string in the defensive backfield and even had an interception or two. Chester would attend the games and embarrass Cheryl with his shouting. He enjoyed those games immensely. Then, of course, Luther started associating with the wrong crowd, and one thing led to another, and he lost interest in the team and sports altogether. It made Chester crazy to hear seemingly intelligent people go on about how harmless drugs were, like marijuana, when all they had to do was look at Luther and see someone whose life went all to hell due to drugs. One day the kid had a B average and a spot on the football team, and the next he was failing and staying out all night with his loser buddies. Gary raised his head and let out a sharp yip, his nose twitching, eyes wide. What is it, boy? Sometimes the dog heard people passing the house and got anxious. Maybe more trick-or-treaters were out and about. Chester had left the light on for Abigail, and some kids might interpret that as an invitation. If they rang the bell, Chester decided he would not answer. He'd had enough tonight. Gary barked again and rose into a sitting position. Quiet, boy, your mom is trying to sleep. But the dog remained agitated, his ears alert and his mouth tight. Chester cocked his own head, listening. Other than the announcers and cheering crowd on the TV, he heard only a vague whispery noise. It could have been anything, the water pipes or distant traffic maybe. Gary stood on all four legs now, his ears pointed forward, ready to spring for the front door. Okay, Chester said, scrabbling to his feet. As he rounded the corner into the front hall, he could see through the small window in the door that looked like ticker tape. And he could see through the small window in the door what looked like ticker tape, arcing through the air. What the hell? Gary bolted to the door and barked sharply. Chester looked out through the window to see the trees, a big maple and an old oak, strung with miles of pristine toilet paper. He yanked open the door and watched a long stretch of TP sail across the black sky, lit white by the front light. Out in the street, two dark figures were moving off, the pale soles of their sneakers flashing as they ran. You sons of bitches, Chester shouted, his curse met by a cascade of retreating giggles. It was the giggles more than anything, more even than the mess in his trees or the knocked-down yard signs that got to Chester. He ran down the walk to the driveway and from there to the street. Gary followed, barking and skipping, thrilled to be in on the chase. Chester could see nothing but shadows up the street where the hooligans had run and heard distant slaps of rubber on pavement. Then someone yelled, "Screw you, old man." That did it. Chester almost ran into the house for the keys to the Taurus and went into the garage. He opened the door and backed down the driveway. He was going to track those punks down. As he shifted into drive, he heard Cheryl's voice calling from the front door. Chester, where are you going? She was in her nightgown, her arms wrapped around herself to keep warm. He didn't answer her. She'd just try to talk him out of this. Take care of the dog, was all he said. Then he hit the gas and tore up the road. It took him a few seconds to realize he hadn't turned on the headlights. And when they came on, illuminating the road and the shrubs along the sides, he could feel the alcohol in his blood distorting everything. He felt like he was plunging through a tunnel. He gassed it up a hill and around a turn. The road was empty, but the kids had gotten a big head start. He'd catch up with them around the far side of the lake, he was sure. They were probably headed to the beach to smoke dope and drink. He'd wring their skinny little necks. When he reached the beach, he braked and peered into the darkness. No one there. God damn it. He drove on around the bend. Here, the road ran directly alongside the lake to his right. Straight ahead, he thought he saw movement, someone in the road running away. Chester accelerated. The person had nowhere to go. On the left was a steep incline covered in thorny shrubs. On the right was the lake. Chester thought about running the punk down, but decided he'd just spook him. He pressed on the gas, but as the headlights crept up, Chester could not quite make out the figure. It looked too short, and then again too wide to be some teenager. Maybe it was some younger kid in a dark, elaborate costume. That's what it was, some kind of animal getup. Then as he got closer, Chester saw that it was not a kid at all. What the hell? It was a bear. He hit the brakes, and the wheel jerked, and he felt the front of his car dip, and then he heard a splash. A bright white light went off in his eyes like a camera flash, and when the spots had slowly disappeared, he could see that the front of his car rested in the lake with the rear wheels still on land. God damn it to hell, he said. At first he couldn't remember what he was doing here. Bit by bit his memory started to pull together. The 3 little pigs, the bag of crap, the toilet paper in the trees, the bear, and the beer. His lawyer had once advised that it was better to leave the scene of an accident if you've been drinking. You could then turn yourself in the next day after you've sobered up. He had to hurry before someone came by. He pushed the door open and stepped out into the water. His feet sank deep into the silt, and as he clambered up the bank and onto the road, he realized his floorshines remained behind in the muck. He listened and waited. The night was absolutely quiet. He looked up at the full sky of stars and walked as fast as he could in his wet socks toward home. Next Halloween, he vowed, he'd turn off the lights and ignore the doorbell. Thank you.
Another Chris Belden victory here. What a story, Chris. Oh my God. I was like hanging on to the edge of my seat with that one. I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna hit a kid? Is he gonna hit a bear? Is he gonna drown in the lake? Is the bear gonna attack him when he gets out of the water? But no. I love it. Chris, you have the best neck for creating these characters who are quirky, who you don't really like, but who you end up understanding and having a level of empathy for, even if they're cantankerous old men or I'm thinking of other stories you shared on the stream, the grandpa who keeps coming back to life and being cranky every time until he's finally a nice guy, but having this interesting story and the story of the ghost telling the people to leave the house, and all of these quirky, funny situations where we end up laughing and having a great time, but also understanding a possibly problematic or grumpy, nasty character. Anyways, just so funny, so fun, so vividly hewn, and so real. Don't we know that guy, Sandy Carlson, a few moments back just put this in the chat. I swear I know this guy. I think we all know a guy like this, don't we?
I definitely do, yes.
I'm sure you do, Chris, living around that lake in Ridgefield. That is so great. Did I just see a Frankie cameo? Hey,
yes, you did. You snuck in. That's what I was distracted by. She crawled along the floor. She was looking for some scissors.
Well, Chris, another total triumph. And listen, this collection is available. It's out there, folks. Publishers pick this one up. People get excited and follow Chris Belden on social media and tell your publishers who are friends, say, hey, we've got a great collection here that needs to be published.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough sell, especially these days. But what are you gonna do?
Well, I think it should be like a super easy sell because of how much that always resonates. There are always these people who feel like, the world I understood is behind me and I'm so against, everything that's happening. Even if it's not a bad thing, it feels threatening to me. And that's not a good perspective, but that's something that you can understand as
Yes.
a person. That's
Yes.
something we all can understand. Well, everybody, it's been an incredible evening of readings, and it's time for Q&A. Let's have another round of applause for myself and Chris Belden. And for the show, 3 years. Oh, and for our audience, I dropped all my stuff on the floor. I think this is the only prop I have left. And the green lake. Oh my gosh. Oh, what an evening of readings. It's always so cool for Chris and I to get to share with you all. Please pop any questions you have for us about our writing, about the show, about anything you want to ask us. Pop that in the chat and we'll be excited to answer those questions.
Yes, we will. But I'm going to start off. I'm going to ask you a question.
Awesome.
Because we've answered the old questions.
Indeed.
That we true. But when did you start writing?
Oh.
Who?
Poems.
Or anything for that matter. How did this thing get started? Were you just like a little nipper?
A little nipper. That is such a fun question, Chris. Thank you for asking. I actually really I always really enjoyed writing. I always kind of enjoyed the world of creating a story and sharing it. But I would say I really started writing poems when I was getting into middle school in those crazy, crazy years full of emotions and hormones. And I was just starting to learn how to play the guitar. And I said to myself, well, I'm someone who likes to keep myself busy. I'm always, going for the next thing. So I'm like, well, I'm just, my fingers still hurt when I press on one string, but I want to be able to write a whole bunch of songs so that when I'm good enough, I can sing them. And so I think I started with the intention that they would be songs, but really my poem writing really outpaced my kind of putting them to music. I actually couldn't sing and play at the same time until I was in college, which is kind of a funny other story. But I had started to keep these notebooks full of these songs that were really just poems, and I was like unstoppable. I wrote many of them. I was in when I was in second grade, I wrote a lot of little fiction books that were published. That were published at my school.
Right.
And they're great ones. I had so much fun. But those poems were something that were really precious to me. When I was in high school, I was in art classes, and part of my sketchbooks could be poems that were graded as part of, the art that was in the sketchbook. And so that kind of gave me encouragement to continue to do that and express all my feelings. But then it really kind of continued in a more formal way. I took an actual poetry class. And then when I was in college, it was just something that I always did. And I was so excited to finally get through some of those core requirements at Fairfield University undergrad. Anybody out there, you hear me, all those core requirements are intense. I was finally able to take a poetry class with Dr. Kim Bridgeford, who I then followed to the MFA. I followed her. I was going to follow her everywhere.
Okay.
That's really how it happened. It was such a natural form of expression for me. It was something that I first thought in a very enterprising way. Well, let's write some songs to sing and blah, blah, blah. But it really became a wonderful way to express myself in a lyrical way, in a way that could be quick and that I could return to many, many times. And as you can hear, a lot of my poems are not always straight up biographical, autobiographical, but they are pretty personal
Yes,
and come straight from my life. So that's kind of the beginnings of it. What about you, Chris? How did you get started? Oh, I'm sorry if you have any comments before I ask you.
well, yes, I do. I do actually, because I used to, I don't know when the last time it was that you actually wrote a song, but because I'm just wondering, because you tend to write, having been a protege of Kim,
Yes.
formalist poetry, which often has very, it's very strict, in terms of, sometimes anyway, of, meter and all this kind of stuff. It could lend itself to song.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, do you have any? Did you ever? Do you have some songs that are poems, or poems that actually were songs? Have you thought about doing that?
Well,
Maybe adapting some of your poems to a
ooh,
song?
I love that question, Chris, because sort of yes, yes and no. I would say not as I originally conceived of them. I was thinking that, as soon as I learned to play, when I was a young teenager, as soon as I learned to play acoustic guitar well enough, then I'm just going to have this, catalog of songs that I'll just be playing. And that never actually happened that way. Those really just kind of became poems. And like I said, I would focus mainly in jazz guitar. And so I didn't really start to sing and play at the same time in a more like singer-songwriter type way till I was in college. But yes, I absolutely have thought about putting poems to music, performing poems with music, creating poem songs, but in a kind of different sort of way. If you follow me on social media, you'll see I've actually already created 2 poem songs with my dear friend Dave Robertson, which are a very cool combination, where it's kind of not just a song, it's not just a reading of a poem, it's more of like a performance of a poem
Right,
with the music interacting with it.
right.
And I want to continue this project as much as possible. And I now finally have some free time to do it, now that I'm not just like doing master's degrees nonstop. So please stay tuned, people. Check it out and
That's
follow
really
me
cool.
on social media.
Yeah, I want to hear more of these, because those are very cool.
Thank you so
Just,
much. The 2 that are already existing are up
yeah,
on YouTube.
these kind of soundscapes with the poetry. So it's true. It's not quite a song, and it's more than a poem, and it opens up this whole other third thing, right?
Yeah.
Music, and then there's the poem, and then there's this third thing that happens.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm going for, Chris. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to chat about that.
Cool.
I'm so passionate about that. But Chris, let me ask you, when did you start writing fiction? What was the beginning? What was the beginning of fiction writing for you?
Well, I mean, I lived in a house full of books, and we just, everybody read. It was a big family. There were 7 kids, and my parents and my grandmother, and everybody read. Everybody just read all the time. Even the dog read. It was amazing.
Chris
Um,
Belden.
so it was just, lots and lots of stories, and I loved stories. And I remember the first story I ever wrote, which I think was in, uh, I don't know, 6th grade or something like that, 7th grade, and it was a vampire story.
Ooh, yes.
I basically stole the plot from like a TV thing, like The Night Stalker. Like, it was a great old vampire story on TV. I basically stole that, and that was the first thing. And I remember like showing it to my mom and all this stuff, and people were like, "Oh, that's so nice." I'm sure it was horrible, but
But they
so,
saw your passion.
so that I was just like always writing little stories like that. But I didn't. I was more interested in movies, really, and I made movies as a kid, and
Woo!
studied film in college. But I was always writing as well. Took writing, fiction writing courses at college, and then but then the music kind of took over for a long time. And then when I kind of put that behind me, then I really, you know, buckled down and started writing. But by that time I was in New York and I was writing. I was taking workshops with like amazing people,
Nice.
but I'm a late bloomer. Everything, anything that I do well, it's late. Because I was either too anxious to try it when I was young, or it just took me a long time to figure it out, or whatever. Everything kind of came late. So
I
I'm
think
one of those people. It's never too late.
it is never, ever, ever too late. And I want to say, Chris, you've been writing and creating for forever. Maybe not exactly doing the kind of fiction that you're doing right now, but all of the music that you were writing, you were doing screenwriting, you were part of workshops, you were doing volunteer stuff, all of this before you even did the MFA. And the MFA now, even though we both of us look so young, Chris, that was 12. We graduated 12 years ago. We started in December 2008.
Lord help us.
And you know what? To be honest, I went to the MFA program because I was like, well, I have to keep working with Dr. Kim Bridgeford. It was kind of before I was like, I want to keep writing poetry, but it was before I really, really knew that it would be an incredibly important part of my life forever. I was just like, this has to be the next step. But I wasn't really, I wasn't really fully believing in myself yet. And so I think maybe it was a little, maybe you could say it's a little bit late for you, but I disagree. I think it was a little early for me.
You were about 13.
I
And I was
was 22.
97, and
Just bonding around the Crane Lake.
we bonded around the Crane Lake and guitar
That's right.
music, and played Ripple, deep
That's
in,
right.
and exactly.
And
So
like from like day one, we're like, we need to organize a talent show. We were like running shows together, like from the jump, people.
that's right.
We were
That's
the
right.
talent show organizers.
Because no one else, no one else stepped up, and we were just like, okay, let's do this. It was too much fun.
Favorite thing.
All right.
We have a question.
We have a
Perfect.
question from our friend Mike, our new friend Michael from
From the open mic.
the in-person open mic. It's great to have you here, Michael. It's amazing.
Great to have you, Michael.
You have a schedule, Katie. Do you have a schedule or daily routines to sit down and write? What if you're not inspired?
Well, okay. So what I'm about to say might be controversial to some, and maybe not good advice for some. For me, sorry. And if you're a fiction writer, if you're a prose writer that really needs to get pages written and lots of words on the page, that maybe this is not the way for you. But for me, I do not have a daily schedule. This is such a great question. I love this question. I love hearing about people's different routines. I don't have a daily schedule or a routine to sit down and write. Over the years, I used to beat myself up about that. And maybe I used to have specific goals if I was in a class or in a workshop, which was great. But what I found over time is like I would spend so much time stressing about it, but then the poems happen when they happen. The spirit moves and it will move, and I trust it to move. And the poems get written, they get edited, and usually in these like blocks of time and these fell swoops, I do need to have room in my life for it to happen. So I have kind of fought to keep sections of my life open and available for writing, but I actually don't have it as an exact schedule. The what if you're not inspired question, I I only write when I'm inspired. Like I said, you might not want to follow this advice, but if you have a pretty good sense of yourself as a as a poet, let's say, because I'm a one genre person over here. Um, if you if you really trust yourself as a poet, you know that it's going to come, that that's the way that the most authentic writing is coming out of you, and how your revising schedule is typically going to work, and when you're going to have the time for that, then I think as long as you make room for it to happen, like, it will happen, and then you don't need to stress about it, and then there's always a sense of authenticity and flow, which I know is Chris is not going to say that, but if you have a similar flow, like, we understand each other. So maybe not the best advice if you have a big goal.
I don't have, I'm not a, okay, I wake up at 6 in the morning and I write until, whatever time like that. And I know a lot of people who do, and God bless
Yeah,
them. But, everybody's so different, and everybody has their own thing, and whatever works for you is what works for you.
that's right.
I've always found that the less time I have, the more I write. So,
Ooh.
there've been times in my life where I've had, for whatever reason, lots of time, and I do anything but write. Whereas
Mm.
if I have less time, and it's like, okay, I have between, you know, 3:30 and 4:10, I'll write more then than I would if I had, 9 to 5.
Yeah,
Just, and it's just is, and the inspiration comes. I mean, it might be bad. You have to. That's one of the hard things. You have to accept
that's true.
the bad with the good.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I always say I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in get your butt in the chair block. You know,
That's right.
Like,
You can write, like, if as long as you're keeping the pen moving, if it's bad, it's bad. But
it's bad, but there's going to be something in there. You're going to find like one little thing, and it's going to lead to something else. And
that's right.
so if you just sit down and you have no clue what to say, and what am I going to write, and and you just start going, and maybe you'll sit there and pick your nose for a little while, but you kind of need to do that sometimes.
That's true. That is absolutely true. I think it's good to kind of say, I want to write. It's, the spirit hasn't moved, but, here's something, here's a prompt, here's an image. Here's something that I've been wanting to write about, but it hasn't really hit me yet. I think there are all of these wonderful methods when you feel blocked to just be like, okay, we're sitting down. It's not a block. It's like, get your butt in a chair and start it moving. And there's going to be something in there. And sometimes it's the on ramp to to goals, coming down the road a few minutes, a few hours, a few days later. For me, it's always been just this aspect of trust. Like, I know the poems are going to come. I know that I'm going to make the time for it, and I know it's going to happen. And so it's been kind of this like freeing process of trusting that flow, and then kind of pushing myself at times where, maybe I don't have as much time. What a cool question, Michael. Thank you so much. We got a question from Midnight for Chris Belden.
Midnight.
Midnight.
At
Chris,
your service.
how do you map out your short stories, or what formula do you mostly use? This is such a great question.
This, and I'm gonna say, but this right here is for midnight right now, which is
Oh my God, no, 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 no. Oh no. Have you been traumatized by Chris's social media? Oh my God. Oh my God. This scary little baby. Chris has been making jokes with it on a daily basis for weeks now.
that's
And
what Lucas.
every time I open up Facebook or
That's what
Instagram.
Lucas. So what do you have to? I map out my short stories. Well, I mean, the thing that I read tonight was actually part of a novel, but I mean, the chapters in it kind of work on their own a little bit, but
Yeah.
not so much in it. So I kind of knew. Well, I knew where the novel needed to end up, but in terms of that particular chapter, I had no idea. I just, I started out with this character, and I knew the character, right? I felt like I knew him really well because I'd
Yeah.
written from all these other points of view, and the character had appeared in all these other chapters, and he was very juicy, you know.
Yeah.
And also, like, I know this guy, you know, I've
Yeah,
met this
yeah.
guy, and so it's like, okay, you know, what's a good setup for this guy? And I was like, okay, and there's a kind of a calendar to the stories. Things happen certain times a year, and it's like, okay, Halloween. It just made sense. He's gonna,
Perfect.
Halloween, and then it was like stuff's gonna happen, and that's all I knew. And I knew that the bear had to be in it, because the bear makes appearances throughout the story,
I love
throughout
it.
the novel, and so that's kind of all I knew. And I sort of had an idea that he needed to end up in the lake, because there was a guy who ran his truck into the lake in my neighborhood once, and it always stuck with me. I said, I got to get that into a story.
It needs to get into a story.
But,
No.
in stories or whatever, I mean, every once in a while, I kinda know where they need to go, but usually I don't, and I go by the E.L. Doctorow, uh, thing where he always said that it's like, writing a novel, and this works for the story too, is like driving a car at night. You can see as far as the headlights let you see.
Mm,
Everything beyond that is dark,
nice.
but you can get to where you need to go.
Mhm.
So that's the way I do it. So, and some people don't believe in that, but that's
Yeah. I like that. That, I'm not a fiction writer, but that really resonates with me. I think you have an idea of kind of like where you're going. It has a place in your kind of outline, but you're letting it kind of develop as you're writing it, as you're editing it, and it maintains a kind of authenticity and freedom in that way that I think is that ends up being very real and very resonant.
sometimes you have no idea where you want it to end up either. So you
That
just
too.
I mean, when you write a poem, I mean, your poems are not,
No.
necessarily long poems, but some of them are longer than others. And it's like, when you start out, is it like an image or a line? And then it's like you just go, and then it's like, okay, where's this going to take me? I have no idea. And you just, is that how it works for you? Or do you like say, I know the parameters of this poem, and now I just have to fill it in.
Oh, wow. I think whenever I've tried to write certain kinds of formal poetry, or when I've tried to like capture a narrative, then I have a clearer sense of like kind of like the beginning and ending points, maybe. But I would say for the most part, no. Most of my poetry, it's a feeling or a moment or a certain kind of experience that I'm excited to explore, that I'm excited to crystallize, that I'm excited to, okay, write a bunch of lyrical lines, see where these different words are popping out, and see how that's like pushing me forward, and then kind of bringing me back to the top and making me want to like edit again, while still kind of like channeling the original feeling and inspiration. So I would say it's much more of a like of a crystallization process, of a cyclical process, rather than like a sort of beginning to end
Right.
situation there. We have a question from, thank you so much for that question, Chris. There's a question from Midnight for me.
That's it.
uh,
Yes. Where did the spiritual poems you wrote before your journey? And I'm not sure, is he referring to your journey to
I
the
think
Middle East,
I'm guessing so.
fall in comparison to the visuals that you're able to filter in now? And there is, I mean, this is an interesting question, because it feels like my knowing you and knowing your work from way back when you were in 13 years old when you
13 years old.
yeah. And the poetry you wrote back then, and the poetry in your chapbook, and then the poems you're doing now, there seems to be, there's a couple of leaps,
Yep.
and and I think one of them is due to this trip, that you
Yes.
took there, and the transformation that happened, whatever that is.
Yeah, this is such a great question. I really appreciate this midnight, and thank you so much, Chris, for kind of like summarizing what you know of my journey as well. That really means a lot, and that's absolutely true. So where do the poems I write now, where the poems I fall before fall into the dream of minute, I see them as a really interesting continuum of what I've really been through, and other people who have kind of gone through this process of being maybe very religious for a period of time, especially if that's religious in Christianity, being really influenced by that, having it really inspire you and shape you, but also repress you, and maybe even in some ways harm you and make you vulnerable. I think it's been a journey of, being fascinated and formed by the religion and the religious texts, and having, my own reflections in it, which I still do, and then kind of getting to this point where I'm seeing kind of a split between what I love about the beauty of the message of the gospel, and what I see as like kind of, very frankly, Christian hypocrisy, especially in politics, where I see something like Christian nationalism, Christian fascism, where Christian
Yes.
Zionism, to be frank, where it's pairing with governments to oppress people, very frankly. And what I believe about it, what I loved about it, what made me want to be a Christian and write Christian poetry in the first place, was the love, the mercy, the forgiveness, the transformation, this vision of the loving divine, of freedom within that. And I think, it's really satisfying to me now to write these poems where I'm kind of speaking, pretty, with a level of judgment, let's say, and with critique, to what I'm seeing that doesn't match up with that love and with that beauty, and also to that questions it, that looks at how it makes people vulnerable and how it can be dangerous. And so I kind of think of it as a natural progression, but it also reflects deconstruction, which is I am no longer kind of in this one lane of Christianity that I used to be in terms of biblical literalism. I'm definitely taking my own interpretation these days, which is quite a departure. And many people are on a journey of religious deconstruction. So I'm hoping that my poems can be a source of comfort, but I hope they can also be a source of, as people who have never been inside of that world or of that bubble, that they can sort of see that, not everyone is just saying yes and going along with the crowd, that there are people who are maybe stepping outside of that, who are reflecting, who
Yeah.
are changing, or finding a different way to weave in what they feel comfortable with, and reject what they don't feel comfortable with anymore. So I think it's just kind of a natural progression, but it is quite a difference. It reflects what's happened in my life, which is kind of just one stream of things for me, but it has changed my life. It means a lot of things are different for me, and therefore a lot is different in my poems as well.
Well, it seems to me that you've moved closer towards, uh, what it really truly means
I think so.
to be a Christian, but further away from the rah rah holding up the banner. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian.
Yeah. I like to think that, Chris. Thank you.
Just, we
I
all
like
we
to
all
think
we
that.
all saw that we all saw the orange man holding up the upside down Bible over there while they were
Gassing protester.
yes, peaceful protesters just
Peaceful. Yep.
feet away, and it's like, well, okay, there's Christianity there for you, right? I don't
Yep.
think so.
No, that is that is not me. That's not mine. And
Jesus is
Jesus was flipping tables, and he was really speaking a lot of truths to powerful people in his day. Even the Holy Land now, it's a very tense place, and you can see just the layers upon layers of all the different conquerors, all of the different, oh God, the just bullet marks and the ancient gates. I have a poem about that. It's surprising. It's not as sweet, as simple, or trite, or pat as you would think it is. And I hope my poems capture that as well. So thank you so much for that awesome question, Midnight. Chris. Midnight. Woo! Chris, righteous indignation. Yeah. Yeah.
Right
yes,
on.
Midnight. Hell yeah.
Right on.
Chris, I think we need to answer our famous last double question to wrap up this celebratory evening.
That's great. I think we should. I think, and we can probably do it quickly.
Yes.
And I'll go. I'm not going to give a pearl of wisdom per se, but I'm just going to give people an exercise, which I think will lead to a pearl of wisdom. This is something I was talking about when I was at this writers conference a couple weeks ago. And people were asking, like, they were starting out writing, like, what, how do I get going, but this works for people who've been writing and get stuck or whatever. And I said steal, right? Just steal outright, and sit down, take a book that you like, for whatever reason that you like it, and whether it's a story, and it'll work for poetry too, but a story in particular. This works especially for fiction. You take a novel, say, and you go to page 1, and you start literally copying it out, word for word, except change the names of the characters at first, change the setting, change
Mad Lib it.
Yeah, exactly. If it's in the winter, change it to the summer. Start changing things slowly, and then just keep doing that over. And by page 3, by page 4, it's not that book anymore. It's your book.
It's your own story, but you're moving. You've got the scene. You've got your characters. They're in motion, and you're writing.
And you keep going, and then who knows? You could write hundreds of pages like that, and then you just go back to the beginning and fix that.
Yep. Or just like lop it off.
Midnight says,
grabbing my shower. I'm like, oh, that's right.
You have my permission, Midnight. Go forth and prosper.
The watermark appeared on my ceiling the day my wife walked out of me. Something like that.
That's it. Exactly. And then a book to read. This is a very heady book. This is a very
go for it.
It's a sophisticated book, but it's haunted me. It's called The Transit of Venus by Shirley Hazard. That's with two Z's. Shirley Hazard. It's one of those books that it's a novel from the 80s, I believe, and it's one of those books that's a writer's book. Like writers love it because it's so beautifully written, and when you get to the end, you're like, oh my God, it's an amazing book. So if you want to write great fiction, read that book and pay attention.
Nice. All right. I'm gonna be real speedy here. My pearl of wisdom, my recommendation is to just believe in yourself and find yourself a little tiny community where you can share, or a big community, to get out there and don't be shy. I'm hoping that wherever you are, you have a Chris and Katie who want to hear your work, who want to see you perform at your local spot. We're right here online almost every Sunday. We want to hear your work. We want to connect with you. We hope that my pearl of wisdom is just that you believe enough in yourself to actually make that pen move, to write what you want to write, and to believe enough in that to share that with others. We always want to hear people's work. We always want to encourage you. And so whatever it is that you're hoping to create, that you just find that inspiration, just trust that people want to hear it, that it's worth getting down on paper, that it's worth sharing.
Amen.
Thank you, Chris. And my recommendations, I'm breaking the rules because I'm recommending all my friends. Well, not all my friends. I have so many friends, but I'm recommending some select friends today. If you have not read the book Shriver by Chris Belden, this is the original cover. The Simon Schuster cover doesn't look like this, but you all need to read Chris Belden's Shriver. And y'all, if you haven't already gotten these books, you need to get them, peeps. You need to get Sketches of My Rights by John Chance Acevedo. You need to get What's It All For by Philip J. Curtis, aka Midnight. They've been our dear friends all this time, okay? And it's just like 40 years of writing and incredible performance poetry, incredible mentorship, incredible memories in here, and just awesome work. And we're so sorry we didn't get to see them in NYC when they were here last weekend, but I just want to give a shout out to their books as well. Y'all need to get them. Really fantastic stuff, and you need to read Shriver and see that movie, people.
That's right. By the way, if you're in Connecticut on May 18th, A Little White Lie will be screening at the Ridgefield Independent Film Festival.
We'll be posting
May
about
18th gala opening night with a Q&A with yours truly and a reception to follow. So
that sounds so much fun, Chris. So we'll have another movie night. Thank you so much to our amazing audience for being with us tonight. Thank you so much for watching and enjoying us for 3 years. And thank you so much to my co-host, Chris Belden.
And my pal, Katie the Schneider Schneider.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much, everyone. And we're looking forward. Oh, no. Oh, no, Chris, get him out of here. Get him out. Oh, God. We're looking forward to another amazing year, and we will see you after Easter. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.